behind the abduction of women by the ancient gods of legends. And this one here is of Persephone. Often in mythology, maidens are trapped and abducted by great suitors in meadows, seashores, and fountains outside the city. Reference to the following couples is indicative: Jupiter and Europe, Hades, Persephone, in this case here we're seeing this, Hercules and Dawn, Hermes and Epimetheus, Boreas and Orithia, Apollo and Kyrene, Apollo and Coronis, Poseidon and Aethera, Aristeus and Eurydice, Peleus and Thetis, Poseidon and Hippo. Although so far only 2 representations of the abduction of girls have been identified in the Macedonian area, Persephone in the tomb in Vergina, and Helen in the house in Pella recently, and Europa in a banquet room in the Palace of the Goats, we consider them to be of particular importance, and that they are related both to the mysteries of Samothrace, northern Greece, the 2 degrees of initiation, and the more general orgiastic character of worship in Macedonia, rituals for vegetation and regeneration of nature, as well as to social meanings about the importance of marriage. Besides, the god Dionysius snatched Ariadne away from Theseus, a theme that is hidden in the central scene of the crater, the goblet of Derveni, and also in a mosaic floor at the house in Salonika of northern Greece. We're led to these conclusions by the knowledge of the content of the cult in Macedonia, and proportionally by the knowledge that we have for certain about the importance of the raptures in cities of southern Greece. Abductions of women by gods, Persephone. The abduction of Persephone by Pluto, Hades, that is, inside the eponymous box-shaped royal tomb at Vergina of 366 BC, was vividly described by the excavator himself, Mr. Andronikos, the archaeologist, in a lecture he gave to the British Academy in November 1979 on the royal tombs of Vergina. The composition is developed on a surface of 3.5 meter long and 1.01 meter high, with extraordinary freedom, boldness, and fluency in design. In the upper left corner, one can make out something like lightning, that's Zeus's thunderbolt, Hermes running in front of the chariot, caduceus in hand, the chariot drawn by 4 white horses is red. Pluto, holding the scepter and bridle in his right hand, has seized Persephone by the waist with his left. She stretches out her arms and throws her body back in despair. The god has his right foot inside the chariot, while the sole of the left still touches the earth, where we see the flowers gathered by Persephone and her friend Kyane. Behind the chariot, Kyane is depicted on her knees, fearful. The location in which the fresco was found is a royal tomb, and it shows that the Eleusinian legend was known at least to the ruling class. Moreover, the Pluto, that is Hades-Persephone couple, is represented once more in the chamber of Eurydice's tomb in Vergina. The painting on the backrest of the marble throne depicts the gods of the underworld, Hades, Pluto that is, and Persephone, in a 3-wheeled chariot in all their divine majesty. Helen. The second great house of Pella was named after the abduction of Helen by Theseus from the related depiction 325 to 300 BC. According to legend, the abduction took place while Helen was performing a ritual dance in the temple of Artemis in Sparta. In the scene, the Rainer Provus tries to restrain the lively horses so that Theseus, who has already grabbed Helen by the waist and drags her towards the chariot, can jump onto the chariot. With this depiction, we not only have another abduction, but also an indirect reminder of the attempted abduction of Persephone by Theseus and his friend Pirithous, because in the abduction of Helen, Theseus had been helped by his friend Pirithous, who was then and in turn helped by the Athenian hero in order to conquer Persephone. But both of them were imprisoned by Hades, Pluto. Theseus was freed by Hercules when he descended to the underworld to seize Cerberus. Europa. A mosaic representing the rapture of Europa was revealed in a banquet room in the Palace of the Goats. According to the description of the archaeologist Mr. Cotaridou, its background depicts a sea. In its four corners there are sea monsters and small loves, while in the center there are depicted traces of Tessera on the feet of the bull that seizes Europe. And according to the archaeologist, the revelation of the mosaic, combined with other historical and mythological sources, leads to the conclusion that the Macedonian king Philip II considered himself a potential European leader. However, the raptures have an extremely social and religious significance. The importance of these abductions and grabs. To answer the question about the significance of these raptures, we should take into account that in northern Greece, Samothrace, in the mystery celebrated in honor of the great gods, and in the first degree of initiation, the representation of the sacred marriage took place in memory of the marriage of heaven and of earth, ocean and Tethys, of Zeus and Hera, of Cadmus and Harmony, that took place in Samothrace, or of the mother of the gods who gave birth to the Corybantes. The happenings, they evidently include three acts: rapture, search, marriage, and injected the worship probably into the feast of vegetation, while in the second degree of initiation, the representation of a holy death. If now we take into account that behind the secret names of the great gods of Samothrace are Demeter, Persephone, Hades, and Hermes or Dionysus, then the fresco depicting the rapture of Persephone is inextricably linked with the mysteries that were celebrated on the island, and we are also reminded that Persephone is involved with both Zeus and Poseidon. The elder Cavarus, as Zeus, was united with Demeter, who gave birth to Persephone. As Poseidon, he was united with the same goddess who gave birth to a daughter whose name is not given, as Hades is the husband of Persephone in the underworld. In fact, in the Orphic Theogony, Zeus was united with his daughter Persephone. From the union, Zagreus was born. The same is connected with a representation of Helen, who is the sister of the Dioscuri, who are often confused with the great gods of Samothrace being their companions. So if we take the depictions of raptures of Persephone and Helen as a reminder of both a holy marriage and a holy death, we also better understand the second compound of the secret names Axiochersis, Axiochersa, for which the hypothesis had been formulated that comes from the verb chiro, meaning to cut the hair. Hair cutting was done in cases of mourning, of sacred death, for example, or as a tribute to a god, as was done by the sailors who worshipped the gods in Samothrace. Married girls also cut their hair in cults in honor of Hippolytus and Adonis, a sign that they no longer roamed freely like young foals and entered the marriage yoke. Therefore, the abduction of girls, especially by Hades, are open to a different interpretation than that of the death of the young girl, especially if we take into account that melogams collectively participated in funeral rites in honor of a hero or a heroine who died unmarried and were of marriageable age, Hippolytus and Adonis, for example. In these ceremonies is expressed the feeling of anguish they experience in that liminal stage before marriage, during which they participate in a kind of a death. The girls had to renounce, put to death, the life they had lived up to that moment as young singles. Married and funeral ritual permeate each other. Marriage and funeral ritual permeate each other. After all, marriage was such an important social function that the exit ritual for girls who died unmarried was very reminiscent of marriage. For example, Andromeda awaiting death bound with objects in front of her that could be offered either to the dead or for the bride, such as compasses, bathing suits, and mirrors. In addition, initiation rites in general were often seen as a test of death. The same phenomenon was reproduced in myths, in which the girl's rejection of marriage and attachment to the paternal family, Antigone for example, which negates the recreation of life through marriage, imposes punishments, while the polis itself tames her girls into marriage. The abduction of girls and the subsequent marriages lend themselves to a political reading as well. That is, if a people wanted to create a glorious mythical past for their land, they attributed its founding to something of heroic or divine origin, even if it was the product of a violent act of abduction. The ritual repetition of the rapture and marriage by Philip and Olympias in Samothrace, with a demonstration of acceptance and respect for primitive cults, constitutes a political and diplomatic act. We therefore consider that the visual representations of raptures, although limited in number, in combination with rituals of life and death and with social and political facts and requests, have a special significance, and that the separate manifestations in religious life are matched with political and social connotations. From an announcement during an event in Salonika for the 30th anniversary of the discovery of the royal tomb in Regina by Professor Manolis Andronikos, November 2007. Although, of course, we cannot exclude the above versions, we would like to posit one more, since we accept the abductions as events, as a reality of a remote era, and not as initiatory events. As in Greek mythology, as well as in many other around the world, some gods, quote-unquote, either mingled with the daughters and wives of people, or they were kidnapped by them and then gave birth to children. If we assume that these quote-unquote gods were not mortal rulers who were deified, but entities from other planets, then the rapture of the women who gave birth takes another turn. In particular, things turn upside down if we focus on the fact that the gods made and created humans, something we find everywhere. In this case, possibly, the gods, quote-unquote, wanted to enhance the DNA of the people they themselves created through the new generations that would arise from the children of the women conceived with heavenly sperm. It's possible that there were many more reasons. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.